Hello YouTube, this is Dave the Mechanic, back again with another video for you. Today I'm working on a 2004 Chevy Impala. Today I'll be changing the front wheel bearing hub. This is what the front wheel bearing hub on the driver's side looks like. Alright, in order to get this done, you're gonna have to get the car off the ground, or at least the driver's side wheel. I have a jack stand already placed, and I'm using the center beam, the two beams that run from front to back. I'm using the one on the driver's side. You can also use this part here, but you can take a look and see. That's why I don't like using those. And I also have my jack stand ready just in case, for safety. Now with this being a front wheel drive, you can get the lug nuts off because it won't spin in the air, but you will be putting pressure on the transmission on that parking pawl. What I normally do is I'll break these lug nuts loose while it's still on the ground, but leave them on and then raise it up and get them off later. But since I'll be using the impact, I don't have to worry about that, so I have them in the air now. So I'm going to use the impact and get my wheels off. But if you're using a breaker bar or four-way, yeah, I recommend getting them loose while it's on the ground. Okay, so this is part of our wheel bearing here. We're going to have to remove the brake calipers and the brake caliper bracket. We're going to have to remove this rotor, and we're going to have to get off this axle nut. Getting this axle nut off, there's a couple of different ways you can try. You can leave the brake pads on and have someone press the brakes, and that would take away the swinging, which would give you more torque when you're trying to get this off. Or if you're using the impact, it really won't matter as much. So that's one thing to think about. And also, if you take the pads off first, then you're really putting the pressure on the transmission parking pawl when you're trying to get that off with either a breaker bar or something. So the first move I'm going to make is just get the axle nut off. So I'm going to go ahead and get a wire brush and clean the outside threads so that that axle nut doesn't get stuck while removing, and also it comes off a whole lot easier. Now that I have the threads nice and clean, I'll spray it with the little PB blaster, or if you have WD-40, whatever you want to use. I got this supposedly fancy set of axle nut sockets, but the best one I can find to fit is the 34 millimeter. It has a little bit of slack in there, but it should work for what we're trying to do, especially with it being a 6-point socket and not a 12. So that should get the job done. That thing fought the whole way off. Threads still look great. Not sure why it fought that hard, but that's the great thing about having one of these impacts. I would have been fighting all day long with a breaker bar or a ratchet. By the way, you can get one of these. It's a plug-in, it works wonderful. I got this off of Amazon, a little bit over 100 and something. And no, I'm not getting paid or endorsed by them, but I've been using this for over a year or so, and it's great. Now that the axle nut's removed, we can go ahead and remove this caliper by removing it's a 15mm bolt here and a 15mm bolt here. I have a 15mm matchet. I'm going to go ahead and attack those now. Alright, so I have those two bolts out. This would be a good time to wipe these off and clean them up, and maybe use a wire brush, get the threads cleaned up, and then we can go ahead and pull our caliper off. Might need some help from a pry bar. Fighting. There we go. Fought, but it's off. Now that we have the caliper off, we can go ahead and maybe use a zip tie, hang it up. Let's go ahead and pull these brake pads out. This would be a good time to let them know that the brake pads need to be changed as well. And now we can go ahead and get off this caliper bracket. It's also 15mm. There are two bolts right in the back there. After removing the two bolts, the caliper bracket slid right off, and now the rotor is already loose. And now we have a full look at our wheel bearing that we'll be changing. So if you look at the new part, you will see that there's 3 places where there's bolts, and that is right here, here, and on this side. In order to reach those bolts, you have to go from behind. See, I'm touching this bolt here, and there, and there's one here. You most likely have to turn the wheel to reach certain angles. Most likely you have to turn the wheel to the left in order to reach this one, and probably turn the wheel to the right to reach this one down here. I'm going to start by turning the wheel to the left, which, as you can see, it's already turned. So now I can reach this one, and I can reach this one. So I can go ahead and start turning those off. That one, and then this one. Now that I have those two bolts out, I have my wheel turned all the way to the right so that I can access the one on this back side. So I'm going to use the 13mm in the socket and the ratchet, and go ahead and get that off now. Now that we have all 3 bolts out, the only thing holding this part in is there's a little shoulder on the back of the part, and it sits right into the steering knuckle. So we have to pry that out of there. But also, this CV axle has to be pushed back a little bit so that we can be able to start removing it. So my trick is I have an old bolt from something else that I don't plan to reuse. You can, if you have something you can use, a punch or something, I'll put it there, and then you can start to hammer it a little bit until you feel and see it start to back out. And once it starts to back out, you don't want it to try to go all the way out, because you won't be able to. You just want it to start to move. Then you can start to bang on the back of this to get it off. There are, of course, other ways to get it off. If you don't want to use a hammer to knock it off, you can use a slide hammer with an attachment like this. And there's also other ways. If you want to YouTube other ways of getting this part off without hammering it, whatever way is more convenient for you. But I'm going to just hammer it now and get it off, because I know that's the best way for me, being a caveman. Alright, after some hammering, I was able to get the old part off, and there's a little bracket behind there. Keep that in mind. Alright, so this is a good time to get the inside of here cleaned. I'm going to use the same wire brush and start to clean the inside of here. So I'll clean that and come right back. Once you get it cleaned up, you can start putting our bracket back on. You want to put it back on like this. And once you get the bracket on, you can start to install the wheel bearing. All right, when you're putting this back in, you want to make sure you get your wire through first. I'm putting the wire on the right side because that's where the clip for it is. Now, funny thing is, on this car, I don't see a wire for this to be attached to. So either one of two things going on here. Either they got the part that shouldn't have a wire, or the wire, the connection that should be connected to here on the vehicle is missing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on anyways, because it's still the right one. And I'm just going to connect the wire and clip it. And then I'm going to have a talk with the owner of the vehicle. Now that I have the wheel bearing in place, I can go ahead and start placing the 3 bolts in the back. Alright, so I have the wire coming up here, and I have it clipped on here. So they're missing the wire on the vehicle that should attach to this. So I'm going to let her know about that. But now the wheel bearing is secure. Now I need to get the axle nut placed on here. Alright, it fought, but it's on there, it's nice and firm. Alright, once the wheel bearing is in and set, we can get our rotor back on. Then get your caliper bracket back set, and your 2 bolts behind it. Alright, while taking the bracket out, the hardware came out, so we'll have to reinstall the hardware. Alright, and slide the brake pads back in. I know they're old, but got to slide them back in for now until I get the go ahead to do the brake pads. Once that's set, we can go ahead and get our caliper on. I got the brake pad set, so now I cut the caliper down, and I can go ahead and slide that back on there. You may have to press it in just a slight amount to get it back on, because it was hard coming off, but we'll see. caliper was giving problems going on a little bit, so I just got a old brake pad that I use from a different job and just press it in just a little bit. That way you can slide on a little easier. All right, now that we have it pressed in a little bit, it just slides right on like butter, and we can take our 2 bolts and get those set and tight now. Now that we have our 2 15mm bolts back in and tight, holding in our caliper, our brake pads are installed. All we have to do now is put the tire back on. And that is it, folks. That is how you change your front driver's side wheel bearing on a 2004 Chevy Impala. If you liked the video, you thought it was helpful, be sure to hit the like, subscribe button. Also, if you feel this video saved you some money, don't be afraid to leave a little tip in the Cash App. The more reactions and support that I receive is the more content that I'll make.